Welcome to Cooking the Feast. Today we're going to be taking these ingredients, including this flour, and we're going to put them into these bread baskets to shape them, and then we're going to bake them for a little bit and turn them into sourdough bread. That's right. You know you want it. You know you want to learn how to do it. It's in vogue right now. And look, the ingredients are super simple. Flour, water, salt, and sourdough starter. It's really technique is the whole thing for this. So we're going to start off by using a very large bowl, and we're going to measure out our ingredients here with the flour. We're doing that because flour can compact, and so 1 cup is not equal depending on the density of it. So weight is always exact. To our flour, we're going to add our water here, and then we're going to add some of our starter. What we're creating here is called a leaven. And this is going to get the dough nice and active before we add the bulk of the flour and water. This step here is going to be done the night before that you want to actually shape the loaves. The total time for this process is going to be about 2.5 days. And yeah, it's a long time. So you see, after you mix up it's going to look kind of like pancake batter. And that's exactly what you want to see. And so cover it up. I usually do this before I go to bed and place it on the countertop. Next day, when you come back to it in the morning, you're going to see that it has it's starting to look more like starter now. So you see all the little bubbles in there. That's a good thing. That's what's going to make our dough rise. So the next thing we need to do is we need to add some water and see if our leaven is actually ready to go. And what we're looking to see is the floating action here. So you have all the gas built up within it, and if it's floating, it's good to go. So the next step here is we're going to add some salt to 50 grams of water, 1 tablespoon of salt to be exact, and we're going to dissolve that down as best we can, and it's going to sit during the actual water absorption process. So with this, zero out your scale in grams again, and now we're going to add our water and the bulk of our flour. So with this, 475 grams or 2 cups of water go into our bowl. If you measure it out, I can't harp on this enough, but you don't even have to use measuring cups. And what is this strange contraption I have in here? It's called a Danish dough whisk. And as you can see, it does a great job of mixing up our starter and our leaven along with the water. And so you're going to want to break up any of the big chunks in there and then add 700 grams of flour. The Danish dough whisk does a great job of evenly mixing through and not creating any dough spots or flour areas that won't mix right or overworking your dough. It also doesn't get clumpy like a spoon does. So if you're looking to do a lot of bread making or other doughs or mixes, I would highly recommend getting one because the products are great and it really doesn't cost that much. So after you have it thoroughly mixed, this dough needs to sit for a few hours. And why is because you'll see here in this next shot, the dough is very shaggy. It's not very smooth at all. And what is happening is the water is still being absorbed by the flour. And it's going to take a while for it to become smooth and thoroughly absorbed throughout it. So give it a couple, hand mixes here and then let it sit for a while. I did mine up to 4 hours. And at that point, when you come back to it, you're going to have a very nice and smooth dough. Well, a starting point. We're going to make it better throughout the process. So here you go. Let's take a look at it. What do we have here? Kind of looks like pizza dough at this point. And you'll see that is completely different from what we had a few hours ago. And this is where our starting point is for it. Take another close-up on here. You'll see it's completely different, and it's still quite sticky. Throughout this whole process, the dough is going to be very sticky up until the end. And please resist the temptation to just keep adding extra flour. At this point, we're going to take our reserved salt water that we made and pour it into there. Of course, it's going to be a little bit harder at this point, but you need to pinch and pull and push the salt into the dough. And at this point, the dough is going to become very liquidy, but this is a good thing. A moist dough, a very liquid dough, is actually how you get that nice, fluffy, nice interior, and not a thick, chewy bread that we don't want. So work that salt into it. Yeah, use your fist, take out some aggression, any of that kind of stuff. And then once you have it to where it's looking kind of like this, you're going to set it aside and we're going to let it rest for 30 minutes. So the next whole phase of the bread, and what you're seeing a sneak peek right there, is the folding process. We're going to do this by hand. There's no need for stand mixers or anything like that. But what we're doing is creating these gluten chains in here that is going to create a good rise on our bread. What you'll do is you'll take the dough and then fold it around your hand and pull it right off. This process will rotate the dough each time and then add a twist to it. Eventually, we're trying to get a more consistent product like this. And again, fold the dough around your hand and then pull it off. If it's sticking a lot, feel free to wash your hands or to wet your hands ahead of time, as it won't stick as much. And then you're going to want to wait 30 minutes between each fold and then do this a total of 6 different times. So this will take about 2.5 hours with 30 minutes in between folds. And when you're done with that, you're going to have a much, much better product. This isn't going to be as wet. It's not going to be as shaggy. And this is why don't add a lot of flour to it. Because look at this. This is beautiful here at the end. This is the same amount of moisture that we added to it. No more flour. But working it will create this nice and elastic and smooth looking dough. Sourdough is really just a time intensive and technique based thing, where it's just you're doing a bunch of steps but spacing it out with a long periods of time in between. So take your flour now, sprinkle it on your dough board, and just put a little bit over it, because we're going to rest this one final time, and we're going to rest it for 1 hour. And you're going to notice that it does expand a little bit. This isn't like fast-acting yeast where it's going to double in size, but it will get a little bit bigger. And you see it's kind of puffed out now. Do not, smash this down like you would like French bread or something like that. You're going to want to add a little bit of extra flour on top, just a little bit, and put some on your dough. I'm using a pastry cutter here, but you can use a knife, and you're going to want to divide this in half. I like the pastry cutter because you see here, look, it goes right through this and it doesn't stick to it. Remove it and lift up one side and then add some of your flour to it, because we're going to put it right back down on there and we don't want it to stick to the board. Now grab your other piece and do the same. Lift it up, and that's where the scraper is great for this. Add your flour and then put it back down. At this point, we're going to start to shape the loaves. Just a small amount of shaping. This isn't the bulk of the shaping, but get a little bit of flour on the outside of it and then on the other one as well. We're going to create what's called a loose shape at this point. The inside of the dough still is really sticky and wet, but we've just used just enough flour on the outside to keep it from sticking to our hands. And now in this close-up shot, you see that we're trying to stretch a little bit of the outside to create this tension on it. The next shot will show the technique better, but really once you have it done, you'll see a nice, shape starting to form. So pick it up and then bring all the corners to the inside. And this is going to provide the tension on the dough to smooth it out, and then just pinch it together. It almost kind of looks like a dumpling in sense, but at this point, look at it, very smooth on the outside. You can see some of the air bubbles formation on it. And at this point, we're just going to let it rest again. There's a lot of resting in sourdough because there's no fast-acting yeast. Now cover it up. I've been using the same sheet of plastic the whole time, and let it rest. Now these are what are called Benetton baskets, but you can use a bowl as well. These create a great shape. You're going to put your dough into these, and then they will rise and they will take the shape of it. So when you're actually introducing it to a hot environment, it holds its shape better. So to get it prepped, get some flour on it, get a lot of flour in your baskets or on your bowl. And because you don't want this to stick, there's nothing worse when you get it to stick and then it ruins the shape of your loaf. And we all know part of sourdough is these great looking loaves. I mean, it tastes good, but you also know that it looks great too, and it's impressive. So get a little bit more flour on your loaves. We're gonna do our final shapings now. The first step here is to kind of push the bottoms into the center. And this is going to provide more shaping of it, but it's going to provide more tension as well. We'll do the same kind of aspect where we'll flip it over and pinch the bottoms. But to get it started, just keep pushing the bottoms in, and this will create the round effect. Then flip it over and pinch it together. If you're having trouble shaping it here, you can just keep doing this process over and over again, but try not to overwork the dough. Try not to add too much flour. We're adding just enough. Once it's shaped, place it upside down into the basket, and at this point, you're good to go. The excess flour in there will keep it from sticking. So you have a choice now. You can either let these rest for 3 or 4 hours and bake immediately, or you can stick them in the refrigerator overnight, which is what I'm going to do. The next day, when you're ready to bake these, get your oven set to 500 degrees and let it preheat for at least an hour. we're going to be using cast iron today. So this was, this is a $22 cast iron pan that I used just for this. So get it in the oven, get it preheated, and then when it's ready, take it out. We're going to be putting the sourdough loaf directly into this. And so it's hot, so be careful now. Take your dough out of the basket. If it's been nicely floured, it won't stick. Drop it right in there. And there you go. So we need to create some steam vents in here. I recommend using a razor blade because look how easily that cuts through it. And this is where you're going to get some of that nice presentation on there. You can use a knife too, just make sure it's nice and sharp. It will stick probably a little bit. You need a steamy environment, so I put a little bit in there, but you can also use a spray bottle. Spray down the top of your loaf with water, works great too. And so we're going to place in the oven for 500 degrees for 20 minutes, and then another 10 minutes at 450 degrees. Once you do that, we're going to bring it out, and we're going to remove the lid, and this is what you'll have. Ta-da! That's a lot of steam coming out still. The steam helps with the rise, but it's not going to create the great color that we get. So, I mean, this doesn't look like sourdough quite, right? But it is the right shape. So at this point, we're going to put it back in the oven for 15 to 25 minutes, and that's going to darken up the outside. All that fermentation is what gives that great color. And then here's our second loaf, which actually went a little bit longer. 15 minutes will give you the first loaf, and 25 minutes is the loaf right here. On the left side, you have the one that was in for 25 minutes, and then on right here, you have the one that was in for 15 minutes. So choose how long you want it based on the color. I mean, I did this, but I'm always going to go that full 25 minutes if needed, because look at how dark and how nice these loaves look. And the inside is still going to be perfect. It's going to be nice and chewy, but not in a real dense way. And when they come out of the oven, they're really crispy on the outside, so be careful with your knife. The next day, the crust will soften up a little bit, but it's still not as good as that right out of the oven bread. So once it's cooled down enough, you're going to want to slice this up. You're going to want to put some butter on this. And look at that. We got some air bubbles in there, the air pockets, and that nice, super crispy outside of it. When I take a look at this, I want to show you that it's not a dense bread. See, look, I can easily just push my finger through this, and it's like tearing apart. It's not pushing apart, but this is the nice, delicate interior that we're going for. It's nice and moist, and it's not dense. I don't want dense sourdough bread. So here you go. This is sourdough bread, good enough to feast, and this is Cooking to Feast. I hope you enjoyed and subscribe for more.